for this. We like to take a sort of a deep dive on a specific traumatic experience. And we always do it from a sort of a scholarly place as well as a lived experience place. Um, Through my trauma work, I've learned that what you know from classrooms, from reading, from even supporting people through trauma is really different than what you learn experiencing trauma yourself. And that's the spirit that we really come to this in, wanting to bring that perspective every time. It's so important. I'm really grateful today to have the Lewis D. Brown Peace Institute here today. Um, this is really what they do. They're going to share their best practices for serving survivors of homicide training. We know that any death of a young person, any death can be traumatic, especially when it's a younger person, and especially to die of unnatural causes. To die in this way really brings even more complicated feelings up than you would normally have. Um, I talked to City Councilor Tel Hajii in advance of this, and Reverend Payson, and they both talked about anger being such a part of responding, and just really wanting that sort of vengeful and obsessive. I know I haven't lost any family members to murder, homicide, but I have lost friends, and uh, I just remember how much my mind was spinning through that and looking for as much information. The really kind of classic trauma symptoms come up, and they're just so obvious in this specific trauma. It's really easy to see harm to people that aren't getting the support they need. So I'm going to zip it there and turn it over to Macaulay Bursey, who is from the Lewis D. Brown Peace Institute. And he is thrilled to be here today. And we practiced our text, so I think we're gonna be good. And we should go. And yes, we will. If you have any tech concerns or anything, and you put them in the chat, Kelsey and I will try to get to that. And yeah, I'm gonna be quiet and turn it over. Thank you, MC.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for having the Lucy Brown Peace Institute here with you all with Worcester Acts. We're thrilled to be in this space. As Amy stated, my name is Macaulay Bursey. You guys can feel free to call me MC. I am from the Lucy Brown Peace Institute, and today we will be sharing some of our best practices for serving survivors of homicide victims, and understanding the circumstances that have brought many of us here. So we just want to be really mindful of that. And if at any point you need to take a break, take some time for yourself, please feel free to do so. And just take care of yourself throughout this whole presentation. And you will be hearing from myself as well as my supervisor, Elena DeStefano. As I said to Amy and Kelsey earlier, she will be on later on in the presentation. She just ran the marathon yesterday, so technically there's a lot going on right now. So we're just giving her that grace period. But we are from the Lucy Brown Peace Institute, and her and myself make up the training and technical assistance and consulting team of the Peace Institute. So just to go over what you are to expect from this presentation, we are going to do a welcome, and you already met the team. We're gonna set the stage and share within ourselves some group agreements and shared guidelines. We are going to introduce the principles of peace. We are going to go through our three learning objectives for today, which are understanding the Lucy Brown Peace Institute and the emotional and psychological responses of survivors of homicide victims, distinguish and identify the roles of professionals who respond to cases of homicide, and the third will be to not leave families empty-handed. And so these are our shared agreements and guidelines that will guide our time here today. And this is for you all to just guide yourself and to really ground yourself in these guidelines and how you interact with yourself, how you interact with the presentation and the information that will be shared along with you, as well as if you guys choose to interact with each other as well. And it is one, try on. Two, it's okay to disagree. Three, it is not okay to blame, shame, or attack self or others because of our differences. Four, we must practice self-focus. Five, notice both process and content during work sessions. Six, practice both and thinking and watch but. Seven, be aware of intent and impact of your actions. And eight, maintain confidentiality. And just to give you guys a bit of a brief overview of what the Peace Institute is, and we'll talk about this throughout the presentation. But over the past 30 years, the Peace Institute has developed the best practices in the field of serving survivors of homicide victims. And we are the go-to agency where families of homicide victims are referred to in the first 24 to 72 hours after a homicide happens. So we get referrals from hospitals, family resource officers, homicide detectives. We connect with funeral homes. We connect with neighborhood trauma teams, the faith community, as well as the elected officials. And I will give some more context as well about how we do our work. Um, but just to ground ourselves in the space after we've agreed upon some of these guidelines, these are 7 principles of peace, and these are central to the work that we do at the Peace Institute. And the 7 principles of peace can guide us towards treating others with dignity and compassion. And these 7 principles are love, unity, faith, hope, courage, justice, and forgiveness. So I'm just gonna give everyone in attendance some time to just identify themselves in the chat, maybe the organization that you work with, the title that you have, and just select one principle that is your strength. Which principle do you hold on to every day that is your foundation? And which principle do you struggle with? And so if people will just take some time, just your name, your title, and the organization that you work with, as well as a principle that is your principle of strength and your principle that is a principle of struggle. And I will demonstrate in the chat.
I can start. I'm Reverend Dr. Sarai Rivera. I am actually I actually work for a Renaissance Medical Group, and I do program development as well as their community and governmental affairs. I've done, I'm a clinician by trade and been doing trauma work for a while. Also, have unfortunately, I'm in the Libertarians Club that no one wants to be a part of. And I guess I would say faith is the one that I hold, I think is what keeps me daily. And I think what I struggle the most would be probably forgiveness.
Thank you, Reverend. We can use whichever avenue, if folks want to put them in the chat, if folks want to just come off mute and just say it as well. Feel free to do whichever you feel most comfortable with. We'll give some time for that as well, maybe two or 3 more minutes.
I'll speak. My name's Lou Soilis. I'm a pastor, and I would agree with Sarai. Faith and forgiveness. I have had a family member who was murdered. She was murdered by her husband. And that was in 1988, and it still sort of affects all of us. And yeah, so it yeah, it's there. So
Thank you for sharing, Pastor Lou. And thank you for being in this space as well. If folks are nearing done, I just want to pause for a moment of silence and solidarity with those of us who are grieving the death of our loved ones, and those that are grieving the death of family, friends, and let's just stay in a moment of prayer, reflection, and just solidarity for the countless survivors of homicide victims around the country and the ones that are as well in our own community. So we'll just take a moment and a beat just to pause. Right, thank you all. We will be moving along with our presentation. And just as I've stated before, if at any point you need to take some time away, please feel free to do so. And I think I shared this along with Kelsey as well. We do have a semi-interactive activity that I can share along with Kelsey and Amy. It is a poetry template that we'll be attempting to do virtually. Usually we do it in person, so this will be kind of a new thing for me at least. But it'll just be a way for us to kind of recenter ourselves before we get off. So I just want to let folks know that as things are coming up, please take care of yourself. And at the very end as well, we will try to do something so that folks are feeling a little, feeling that it's possible to emerge less burdened than how we came in. As we move along the presentation, our first learning objective that we will be going through this morning is to understand the Louis C. Brown Peace Institute approach and model, and understand the emotional and psychological responses of survivors of homicide victims. Before we do so, I'll give some brief history and context of the Peace Institute, as well as founding and any other information that would allow for me to paint a better picture in your minds as to how the organization does its work. So the picture that you're seeing on your screen is Louis D. Brown, and his quote is, "If true peace is to happen, it would be up to his generation, regardless of the side of the street that they came from." Louis is the son of our founder, CEO, and current president, Clementina Sherry. And he was 15 years old when he was on his way to a Teens Against Violence Christmas party when he was caught in the crossfire of a rival gang shootout. Louis was involved in peacemaking activities. He was concerned with the ongoing violence that he saw in his community. And he was also concerned with why whenever bad things happened in the community, they blamed young folks. But whenever good things happened, the adults would take credit. So that's why he believed that if true peace were to happen, it would be up to his generation, regardless of the side of the street they came from. So it wasn't whether folks were from Roxbury, Boston proper, wherever they were. He believed that in order to cultivate cycles of peace, we would need to interrupt cycles of violence. And just immediately following Louis's death, the media narrative was that he was gang involved, that this was a drug deal gone bad. And something that I'm sure many of us have, as providers, have heard, that he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And these things just happen when you live in X community. So this is to be expected. And so at that time, there was very little resources available for Lewis's family. When Clementina went to the hospital and when she lost her son, when she left, she reported leaving empty-hearted and empty-handed. There were no resources given to her, and she felt empty within her soul as well. When it was found out, however, after the fact, that Lewis was a straight A student, that he had aspirations to get his PhD, to become the first Black president of the United States, and that he wrote these dreams down and was working towards them, then the media narrative switched. And so some of the resources that were available at that time started pouring in. And Clementina found that resources were indeed available just for those that were deemed worthy. And so families were re-victimized and had to clear a certain bar of worthiness in order to receive the resources that should be made available to everyone. So her and her then husband, Joseph, co-founded the Louis Z. Brown Peace Institute to make sure that families would not have to go through this again, and that they were treated equitably and effectively, regardless of the loved one, regardless of the circumstances of their loved one's murder. And so that is the work that we do nowadays. That is the work that we have done for the past 30 years. And the nonprofit is in this year going to celebrate its 30th anniversary from 1994 to 2024. And so although how we've done our work has evolved and has shifted, our mission, vision, and beliefs remain to serve as a center of healing, teaching, and learning for families and communities impacted by murder, trauma, grief, and loss. Our vision is to create and sustain an environment where families can live in peace and where all people are valued. And our belief is that all families impacted by murder deserve to be treated with dignity and compassion, regardless of the circumstances of their loved one's murder. In the 3 decades since its founding, the Louis C. Brown Peace Institute has become an internationally recognized multi-service agency serving thousands annually. Our philosophies and our work are embraced, emulated, and honored nationwide by our collaborators in law enforcement, professional societies, faith communities, elected officials, and academia. And this is how we do our work. So the way that we do our work at the Peace Institute is broken down into 3 pillars, and that is our families, the community, and the society. And so within the first pillar, we have services and outreach. And these services are consistent and compassionate for families of murdered loved ones and the families of incarcerated loved ones. And so at the Peace Institute, we have a dual mission. We consider ourselves, and we are, a survivor-centered and offender-sensitive agency. And so I'll talk about this a little bit as well. I'm sure some of you guys may know about it, where during our Mother's Day Walk for Peace camp kind of process right now, and our theme for the past 2 years has been cultivating cycles of peace. And so that's why we're holding both and, because we believe that like Lewis believed, that in order to cultivate cycles of peace, we have to interrupt cycles of violence. And the only way to interrupt cycles of violence is by servicing families on both sides, so that that circle of retaliatory violence does not continue, and so that we can actually breed kind of community peace. And so within our families, we have within the first pillar, services and outreach, we have our SOS team, which is Survivor Outreach Services team, and they provide emotional and practical support for families in the first 24 to 72 hours after a homicide happens, using a publication that we have compiled over the years of serving these communities, our burial guide. And this burial guide is a step-by-step workbook for regaining control and ongoing advocacy. It is an important tool for survivors and the agencies that serve them, in order for them to go through that process and to know what that next step is. And we'll talk about that in the third learning objective, which is to not leave families empty-handed. As I'm sure many of you can attest, when survivors go through such a traumatic experience, there's a lot happening. There's a lot of resources that could be available, but what are we giving them? What is their guiding? What is their roadmap in order to be able to navigate all of these things? And so at the Peace Institute, along with that activity that we'll do later on, the asset mapping, the burial guide is just like a one-stop shop in order for families and survivors to know what's next, who do I need to meet with, who, and to just keep track of that process as well. Another aspect of our services and outreach is our healing and support services. So when survivors are ready to take that next step in their healing journey, we have our healing and support services that provide an ongoing healing and safe space for survivors of homicide victim, suicide, overdose victim, families of incarcerated or formerly incarcerated loved ones. And these spaces are non-judgmental for families irregardless of their circumstances. And the third aspect of how we do our work within the services and outreach is our reentry team, our community reentry services team. So as I talked about before, we work with both those that lose a loved one due to homicide and those that lose a loved one to the justice system. And so we help incarcerated individuals that are returning back to their communities. This is a comprehensive 3-year program that helps participants cultivate a new mindset as they transition from being incarcerated back into their communities. And so it is really about giving them the tools to be able to come back into these communities and not have to reharm them. And so what resources do they have available? How can they best show up in these communities and be a productive member of these communities? Apologies. Our second pillar is our community, which is advocacy and awareness. We have a policy team at the Peace Institute. Oh, sorry. Before I move on to this, within the families as well, we have how we allocate our budgets. We have our rest in peace and our live in peace funds. Our rest in peace funds, and I saw somebody in the chat say that they saw me at the breakfast meeting on Friday. So you'll be very familiar with this. I believe that was Kathy. But our Rest in Peace Fund is the fund that is given to families as they are trying to bury their loved one with dignity and compassion. Homicide and gun violence is not something that families or individuals plan for. And so when these come up, and we know that a lot of funeral homes want their money up front. And so people don't just have $30,000, $20,000 just lying around because they don't expect to use that to bury their loved ones. And so this is a fund that we use in order to allow families to bury their loved one with dignity and compassion. And we also have our Live in Peace Fund. So when families are affected by gun violence and by homicide, that might be the primary breadwinner that is affected, or perhaps somebody was attacked and they don't feel safe in their home anymore. So how do we make sure that we're able to relocate them? What funds do we have available for their safety and for them to continue to have a basic standard of living and not be too affected by the events that are the traumatic events that they are going through? And so our Live in Peace Fund handles all of that. It gives families gift cards to do groceries, to pay some utilities that might be affected. And this fund as well also is when we need to do relocation services for families as well. This comes out of that fund. And so the second aspect of how we work within the Peace Institute is our community. So that is advocacy and awareness. We have a policy and advocacy team at the Peace Institute that works to make sure that legislation is survivor-centered and offender-sensitive. We pair with different organizations, with different providers to these ends as well, and to make sure that survivors have an active voice in the legislation that is shaping their municipalities. And so we work at the municipal level and at the state level as well. And the last pillar that we really work with is our society. So this is what we are doing here. that is convening with other providers, other community partners, and other individuals that are involved in change making and peacemaking in their own communities to pass along maybe best practices training. And so this is training that instills the value of peace and equips providers, educators, criminal justice and public health professionals, and institutional stakeholders to respond equitably and effectively to families dealing with murder, trauma, grief, and loss. And so that involves the work that we are doing in with other partners in that respect. And within this sort of training and technical assistance, we have a variety of trainings that involve this one. This could be as expansive as you like it, or we could also condense it down as we're doing today, as well as piecing it together. That is a training that we have for our white allies, because we know that the majority of the populations that we tend to service are Black and Brown communities. So how are we making sure that there are no gaps forming in service, as well as trainings on our healing modalities that include peace play in urban settings, as well as Peace Zone, which is a curriculum that we had devised for the Boston public school system. And so now we are just gonna take some time to talk about the numbers aspect of the work. People in Massachusetts directly impacted by homicide between the time that Lewis was killed in 1993 to 2021, there were 4,467 homicides. Excuse me. Homicide grief expert Lula Redmond has estimated that there are 10 close relatives for each one victim. No amount of justice, restitution, prayer, or compassion will bring our loved ones back. And so if that is true indeed, that for every one victim, there are 10 people at least affected, then we know that there are at least 44,670 survivors in between those times. And that is still a conservative number. That number does not include extended family. It does not include friends, neighbors, classmates, or coworkers who are also grieving and traumatized. And so something that is an unfortunate aspect of this, we know that public officials will say this as well, that the number of homicide rates go down. Well, even if that's the case, even if the number of homicide rates go down, the number of survivors, the survivor rate just continues to go up. And so that is the reality of the work that we are doing. And so we just want to be very mindful of that as well. As I talked about when we talked about being a survivor-centered and offender-sensitive organization, homicide impacts both sides. So the families of the homicide victims and the families of people incarcerated for homicide or by gun violence. The picture that you see at the very bottom, that young man is Charles Bogues, and he was the person that was convicted, that was brought in for killing Lewis. And so there is a very deep story there. And at times, I don't know if it's really my story to tell, but being part of the training and technical assistance team, I do bring these stories to our providers. But that is him and his mother. And so Clementina, following the death of Lewis, really wanted to meet, to understand who would raise their son to kill. And so she had reached out to the mother of Charles Bogues. And so we're located at Fields Corner, and up the street from us is a little pub called I forgot the name of
The
the pub.
Blarney Stone.
The Blarney Stone. Thank you, Elena. And so they met there, woman to woman, mother to mother, to really talk. And she saw across from her somebody that they could be in the same shoes. Nobody has raised their son to kill. And so what is the extent of grace that she would want afforded to her? And so she afforded that as well to the mother of Charles Bogues. And something that has come out of this as well with our work in terms of academia is we've worked with other partners in universities across Boston to kind of discuss whether or not the conviction and all of that information was correctly provided. And he was actually present at that time of that presentation by Northeastern Law School. And so Clementina and his mother stayed friends, and I believe stayed friends until Charles Bogue's mother's passing. And so that is how we're doing both sides, that we are working with survivors on both sides of the gun to really cultivate those cycles of peace. And at the Peace Institute, we believe that homicide is a human rights issue. So emotional stress, plus financial stress, plus physical stress, all of those things that survivors experience that we will go on to talk about lead to community instability. Providing equitable and effective responses to homicide stabilizes families and communities and helps prevent retaliatory violence. When a homicide happens, families experience emotional, physical, and financial stress. If we don't address these stresses by serving survivors in the immediate aftermath of their loved one's murder, the crisis and chaos the families is experiencing can spread to their neighbors, their neighborhood, and the entire community. The impact from this experience can lead to instability in the entire community. Responding to families of murdered victims with dignity and compassion requires a significant investment, yet not investing is even more expensive. And this leads us to kind of the midway of our time here with you. We are going to watch a film produced in collaboration with one of our academic partners, Emerson College. This is called Quiet Rooms, and it details kind of the process of what families go through upon finding out that their loved one has been a victim of homicide. And we'll take some time afterwards for reflection, and I encourage you all, just like we did at the very beginning, to either unmute yourselves or use the chat feature. If there is anything that is coming up for you, if you have any questions, just any type of reflection, we invite you to either put it in the chat or post viewing the film for you to come off mute and just give your reflections as well. So I will be playing that out. And please let me know if you can hear it.
Yes, we can hear it.
The
Thank
sound is
you.
fine. Can you make it big? Oh, you can make it bigger. Great.
So the doctor and the nurse came out and they said, Miss Taylor, you need to go to this room. And my son said, if you go in that room, I need to hold your hand.
I couldn't see or hear anything. I don't know how long I sat in this room. But it was the most cold, unwelcoming room I've ever been in my life.
The room is a reflection of how void of what people know. The only people that know how this message is delivered are the people who deliver it and the people who receive it. What we thought that we needed to say is, here's the reality of our lives that we do, 40,000 times a year in the United States, at least. It's a horrible place to be to give the news after you've worked on a child for half an hour, that doesn't survive a gunshot. And you're giving the news to a parent who's leaving the hospital without a child. And you're never going to see that person again.
The paradigm as it's designed right now is that we're doctors and we treat the injuries that are caused to the physical body by the bullet, but there's so much more. There's a very specific sound that a mother makes when you tell her her child is dead, and that sound sticks with you forever.
keep myself busy and fighting because of my son, Daniel Taylor. Daniel was a go-getter. He was a funny, outspoken person. He went to Mass Bay Community College. He got his degree in criminal justice, and then he also said that's not what he wanted to be. So after that, he also pursued his career in being an electrician, and he got his degree in electrician and also got a job being an electrician.
What I want people to know about Louis and what I remember about him is he's every parent's child. You know, he really didn't like to do hard work. He ate me out of house and home.
Marquise is beautiful. He's like his mom. He's humbling. He's happy-go-lucky, always smiling. Like even in the photo that the police took, them big, beautiful teeth. He's dark-skinned, so whenever he smiles, all you saw. He'll give you the coat off his back, dial out his pocket. He was always giving, always caring. If he saw you on the side of the road with a flat tire, he would stop.
Danny was all about family. You know, he had a heart like mine, but a temper like his father. You know, a lot of people were scared of Danny, you know, but he was loyal to the end. And he has a dry sense of humor. He was always, you know, he just did the silliest stuff, and he loved to draw, you know, loved family. And his daughter, his only daughter, Denasia, was born, you know, I just had a promising future.
My son loved kids. He didn't get a chance to have any children. He did all kinds of stuff for the kids in the neighborhood. He loved basketball, he loved music, and he loved food. When he got out of jail, he went to Bunker Hill to apply to become do culinary arts, become a chef. Didn't get far because of the situation.
At the same time, Louis also had huge dreams. You know, he wanted to be the first Black president of the United States. He didn't just have dreams, he wrote that down in a project when he was in the 8th grade at the King's School. And Louis also was concerned about the ongoing violence and how they portrayed young Black teenagers when violence happened.
The culture of violence in my neighborhood and in my community that I grew up in was, in a way, a form of currency, right? Where it gave you purchasing right to respect, power, authority.
Men and boys from my community that I've watched grow up, they wanted to be doctors, they wanted to be basketball players, they wanted to be all kind of things, but because of the environment, you know, they just went a different path.
You go from not worrying about the little things to caring about the bigger issues. You know, it's not whether or not I'm coming home with bad grades, but whether or not I'm making it home.
Everywhere he went, he was driven because we were concerned about the violence that was happening. And so Louis never walked anywhere. So the day he walked was the day he was killed.
Prior to his death, we went on a cruise, a 7-day cruise, and I begged him to go to the captain's ball with me, and we went, and that's the picture. I begged him to go to the captain's ball and put on a shirt and tie, and this only ended up being his obituary picture, because this was the last shirt and tie he was in. But I believe in fate. I believe in God. Like, God knew his destiny. Because I always say, you know, he was my child. He wasn't no saint, but that was my child.
The day I was notified about my son's death was on a Tuesday. I actually was at work. I got a phone call stating that something happened to Bo, which is my son, for me to go to Boston Medical Center.
So we shot to the hospital, and some of the people that were at the hospital, were at the scene, came to the hospital and said, hey, that didn't happen like that. A nurse tried to approach Colin and said that, a couple more minutes he would have been resuscitated, Bo. And that was a lie, because Bo had died at the scene.
I had to, number one, be told that my son's life was taken. I had to go to the morgue, not one morgue, but 2 morgues to view my son's body. It was packed with people, everybody trying to find out who's their loved one. And I remember going in and they said to me, which one is yours? How do you ask a mother who was just told her son is dead and all you can say, which one is mine?
So he showed us a picture to identify to make sure it was my son. And I said, yes, that's my son, but could I have a picture? A copy of that picture? He said, no, you can't. I'm like, I can't have a copy of this picture? He said, no, nobody gets a copy of a picture of this child or loved one in the morgue. That's their records.
You're not just dealing with the loss of your child, you're dealing with how people treat you. Like when my son's life was taken, they tried to say he was a gangbanger, he was this, he was that.
There were no resources whatsoever for me or my family to navigate this journey. I was not offered a victim advocate. I wasn't offered any funds to bury my child. It was more so, I felt like I was a criminal the way they were treating me.
So my daughter works in the medical field, so she got arrangement for me to go see my child. But the only way I could see my child was I had to be handcuffed to see him. So Becca came back and she said, Mom, the only way you can see Daniel, you have to be handcuffed. I said, okay, gotta see my baby. Didn't matter.
At that time, we left because there was nothing that we could do. We just left, and I left empty-handed physically and within my soul. I didn't know what else to do.
How do you deal with something like that, right? People don't understand internally the things that we go through. We have to go to the morgue, then we have to go home. There's so many detachments that come with that when you lose a loved one like that, right?
They talk about them in so many different ways, no matter what the circumstances is, They no longer do this, because of mothers like me and other mothers, but they used to put your son or your loved one that was murdered's criminal records in the paper or describe them in a certain way.
So we're not just dealing with the loss of our kid, we're dealing with people judgment and saying things and just being negative and evil. And it's like we're the victims, but we're getting treated like we the perpetrators.
You are denied victim assistance because your son contributed to his death, his murder. And I wrote them back and I said, well, I don't know where you got your information from because according to the police report, my son was killed in a routine traffic stop.
And I knew my child's life mattered, but I was still suffering in silence based on society, based on how I felt like he was still being re-victimized in death.
There was no, I'm sorry for your loss. There was no, she got other kids, let me make sure they get something to eat tonight because I know today was a stressful day. There was no checking in on my kids to see if they had any mental health services. There was none of that, until I went to Legacy Lives On and the Peace Institute.
I don't even know how it happened, but we got introduced to a support group. Legacy Lives On, and we got into that support group, and everybody started talking about their hurt and their pain and how someone was lost in their family, so we could identify.
But in the aftermath, as we know, as our loved ones are buried, everybody's gone. All the support is gone, the lights off, everything is back on you by yourself individually. I started this organization, Legacy Live On, for support in the aftermath.
And we would meet there and we would talk about our highs and our lows. When I first got there, I couldn't talk about anything. I literally was on my knees in tears, crossing over the threshold, asking for somebody to help heal my heart.
We all have what's within us, the innate ability. We all have what it is that we need to heal internally. We just need a safe and neutral space for that to happen without judgment. And that's what Santre Wordplay did for me. This modality is something that has helped me when I've had no words to say, what am I feeling? How am I feeling? What is going on? It was culturally and spiritually relevant to me. Talking to a therapist didn't work for me because they didn't look like me. So it's made up of everything that's in the world, everything that's possible, everything that could be in the world. People will donate. People will donate images or miniatures. We don't call them toys. That's one thing I've learned. We don't call them toys. They're miniatures. We broke them down in different categories. Death and grieving, peace and war, religious, spirituality, superheroes, supervillains, dwellings, houses, fences, bridges, transportation. Again, everything that is in the world. And it's not about having a perfect world. And so when people come in, a lot of times, it's not always about talking. You can feel when something is on somebody's heart, when something is heavy. And the invitation is, see what's calling you. Put it in the sand and leave it there.
Although this is not a club you want to be a part of, you meet amazing, amazing, supportive, loving, always got your back. It's a majority of women, but there are some fathers there. You learn so much. And it's all, your healing is all in what tools you gravitate to, what tools you pick up, what tools you use.
And what you need in order to build strength or build anything that you want, you need tools. You need a box to carry you. All your things around. Your hammers, your wrenches, you know, your courage, you know, your hope, your dreams.
I started to get better. I started to like Danny was walking with me. Like I didn't even know where I was getting strength. I was saying things and I was doing all these presentations in the city and not knowing, but I know it was him walking with me. I know he gave me the strength.
People see us in like, for someone who just had a loss and they come into legacy and they see us and they be like, wow, like y'all lost kids. We have moms who lost 2 children, you know. But if they didn't tell you, you would never know.
I want courage so I can be able to say things about my child without breaking down and have courage to fight for him. That the cops are not fighting for myself. I just need courage for that.
Like I'm gonna tell you my story before someone else tries to tell it. Does that make sense? And when you tell it, you heal, right? When you tell it and it's authentic and it's truth, you heal.
So the transformation is, how do we look at people as human beings? And how do we make sure the resources are there so that they don't have to pick up that gun?
You know the sad thing about it? I had compassion for the young man who took my son's life. As they would say, the person of interest. And I believe in second chances. You know, unfortunately, you know, this young man has killed again and again. And at some point, I just believe you need to sit still.
In the end, it's peace. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. It's not saying problem is not there. I don't need to feed the problem because it's being fed. I need to feed the peace, the healing. That's what needs to be fed. So there's this story about a grandson talking to his grandfather, talking about he's so angry, and so the grandfather says, well, there are two wolves inside of us. There's good and evil, and they're both fighting inside of you, and then the grandson says, well, grandfather, which wolf will win? The one you feed.
Peace. I heard a rapper say that I don't want no problems. I actually think they're right, cause I don't like the drama. Some will call it an oasis, others say nirvana. Either way, my soul is heavy and I'm trying to find it. Yeah. Cause nobody wanna be civil, but it seems like civil war can happen any minute. People in desperation when they get pushed to the limit. Jesus said he bring peace, but the peace he talking is different. Yeah. Cause we all looking for peace and quiet. But some of us confuse peace with quiet. Just because things are quiet doesn't mean no conflict. Things may have to get louder if we're being honest. And that's what many...
Thank you, MC, for setting that up. So that is, I'm reading the chats and I was reading them as they came in. That is powerful and sad. I think that encapsulates it perfectly. So we're going to take a minute and just take a deep breath. And then we're going to just ask for any reflections that you still feel like you want to share. Or, you can come off mute or drop them in the chat. But let's just pause for a moment before we jump back into the PowerPoint. All right, thank you all. And again, that was done with our partnership with Emerson and MGH, and Emerson has an initiative called Transforming the Narrative of Gun Violence. So a large theme of what they do is using their media program to exactly that, transform the way that the media talks about gun violence and talks about survivors. And again, I just bring us back to that survivor number that MC shared, that when we say survivors, it is not just, we're not focusing on the amount of homicides that happen, or focusing on the forever growing amount of survivors and how they, should be treated equitably and effectively after a homicide occurs. So in the immediate aftermath of a homicide, the next few slides we're going to show is a lot of information on the screen, and it's done. I'm not going to go through everything. We'll share these slides, you can read them, but it's done on purpose just to show that this is the tip of the iceberg of there is so much happening immediately in the first 24 to 72 hours after a homicide occurs. And also with each of these things that, a survivor is going through, there's, one plus more provider in each of these spaces too. So there's just a lot happening. So I'll kind of read out a few of these on each slide. So in the immediate aftermath of homicide, families are going to experience feelings of helplessness, confusion, and inability to process all of the details. That's a really important one to kind of highlight for a moment, because it is important to recognize that the brain, when trauma occurs, always looking at assets of, a response, a human response, and not focusing on the deficit. So when trauma is occurring in the brain, yes, there is more confusion and inability to process. One of the first things that goes is the ability to use language. That's why often, talk therapy is not necessarily the most effective immediate intervention after trauma that kind of is very, very powerful and helpful further down because of what's happening in the brain. Yet also what's happening in the brain is a heightened sense of creativity, you being able to activate safety measures like flight, fright, all of those things that we know so well and that we've heard so many times. So yes, there's that confusion and inability, and it's also recognizing the assets of what's happening at that time, which is a person's able to be more creative, do what needs to be done to survive in that situation, and you know, survivor's going to know what's best for them. So it's really trusting and listening to them and not just giving them a lot of information and making sure that they feel empowered to choose and to tell you what's needed. So they're going to have total despair. They're going to have grief and shock, imagining the murder or seeing the loved one's body. We heard some of that in the video. Intense anger at the senselessness, feelings of guilt. There's emotional needs of understanding, emotional needs from providers and from the people around them, of being understood, validated, having people have patience, to be listened to. They need a safe space. At the Peace Institute, we actually have everyone either meet immediately in the first 24 to 72 hours. We have them meet with our survivor support coordinators at the Peace Institute for this reason of a safe space and neutral space. We do Zoom as well, but we don't go to homes or onto the scene. Also, survivors need to express emotion without judgment, to be treated with dignity and compassion, and to know that their loved one matters and does matter. They have practical and financial needs, of course. So prep for the idea of the body, support at the hospital or the scene, crime scene cleanup. A lot of times, just something to point out that you may not think of is that the cost of the crime scene cleanup is on them. So we have families that have had to clean their own crime scene up. And so, you know, that's just adds layers of trauma as well. Securing personal belongings, funeral and burial plans, travel arrangements, maybe visas that need to come in for family members, managing multiple agencies. And then within the week or the weeks following your loved one's murder, families may experience trouble focusing, which makes funeral planning difficult, fatigue from decision making, numbness, disconnection, tension, regret or wishful thinking, shame or blame for the way their loved one died, sleeplessness, tension between family members. So before I kind of just like move into the next thing, it's like, again, sitting with all of that is, you know, leading up the first 24 hours to the first week. That's what research shows us. Some, again, tip of the iceberg of what a family is going through, and just things to keep in mind, because the goal always is to reduce re-trauma, reduce somebody being re-traumatized, and to limit stigma being put back on them. Okay, so now we have learning objective 2, which is to distinguish and identify the roles professionals who respond to cases of homicide, the roles of professionals who respond to cases of homicide. All right, so again, we do an activity at the Peace Institute where we love to, it's called asset mapping. We start with this chronological timeline, but I'll set everything up and give some context. So at the Peace Institute, we always say that our goal is to not start many Peace Institutes everywhere. It's really to be a powerful center of convening other providers and great work that's happening all over Massachusetts and all over the nation, and to say that there are people in those spaces that are doing incredible work. And the one kind of area of expertise that we lean in, that we've been really doing for 30 years, is equipping providers with a survivor focused perspective to work in what they're already doing for survivors in a way that reduces traumatizing them. And so we believe that when that happens, you can then interrupt cycles of violence because you're not like perpetuating that system of being survivors being re-triggered and re-traumatized. And then we also believe that you can become more equitable and give people not the same thing because we know that that doesn't work, but give people what they need and what they're telling you they need. And so we put up this chronological timeline to show also when we say providers who we're talking about. So we work with survivors from when they receive the death notification through ongoing grieving and healing. And there's no timeline of our services. Sometimes a survivor will come to us for that funeral preparation and then they don't come back for 10 years. That's fine. That's wonderful. That's what they want to do. And other times they come for one thing and they never use any services from the Peace Institute again. Or sometimes we've had survivors we've worked with now for 15 plus years. It's whatever works for them. It really is a center of healing, teaching, and learning. Come in for what you need when you need it. So we work from death notification to ongoing grieving and healing. And then we break that down into also funeral and investigation and legal process. And so this is again, this slide is just to show that this is basic, kind of what you would read in textbook of providers who work in each of those spaces. So picture you are a survivor and you have all of these providers within the first week is you get introduced to somebody from each of these agencies, and then you get introduced to the ongoing healing and grieving, the counselors, the social workers, maybe either within that time frame or a little bit out. So we'll just like pause on here for a minute so you can read through it and just kind of, yes, sit with that of how many providers can be working with a family. All right, and see if you want to switch it. And then typically definitely when we do longer trainings and then also when we're in person, we'll do this all together with writing. Now we move on to our activity from the chronological timeline, which is called asset mapping. And so we leave these columns blank to be more focused on the town, the city, the region that you all are working in. And we say, okay, who's doing death notifications? Is it the first responders? What are the, does somebody have a contact with one of them? Then we go into funeral preparations. Who are the funeral homes? We know that the cemetery needs to be paid up front in cash. So it's sharing that information. Then we move on to who does legal proceedings, investigation, and then we move on to who is in the space of ongoing healing, who is running like survivor groups, who is doing counseling, who has like, various modalities of healing techniques or therapy. And so we also say in everything, like use whatever works for you and use our stuff. So if this is something, you wanted to use when you had further time, or, if you wanted to kind of bring us back to really dig into this stuff, we do that. And so I think too that we do have the time of, if we want to put in the chat where we feel like we fall in these spaces. And then of course the invitation is you can always come off mute too.
So I feel in some ways I'm in the grieving healing area. Some work I'm doing now is just supporting a book group with men, mostly who've been incarcerated, men and women who've mostly been incarcerated. So dealing with the trauma they've had. And often they also have the trauma of losing someone to homicide.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was Kathy, right? Yeah.
That was me, yes.
Okay, thanks. Because I see Amy wrote grieving and healing as well. Anybody wants to kind of say a little bit about what grieving or healing in what capacity they work in as well?
I would say, bringing people here today is part of the grieving, healing pillar of it. Just recognizing that the scope is bigger than just the people directly impacted, that the whole community is in fact impacted. And so it's gratifying and beautiful that people are here today to learn these skills and kind of take this picture of it. I really appreciate how your perspective is inclusive of everyone in this cycle. And everyone is hurt when murder happens.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think for us, it's, we can elevate the survivor voice by elevating that survivor number. It just so often gets forgotten because, the victim is no longer with us, unlike, in some other circumstances where the victim is still here. This is not one of those situations. I love hearing from you all. Before we move on, just want to give another minute if anybody else wants to share.
This is Kathy again. One of the ways that I view, oh God, my hair looks horrible. Forget that. Okay.
I was brushing mine down too.
Yeah. But one of the things I view my role as is, for me, when I first worked with incarcerated people and returning citizens, I thought they were the perpetrators and they hadn't been victims. And it was really an education for me to understand, no, they've been victims too. And so I try to pivot and leverage my experience and make sure people understand that. Because I think if we're going to stop homicides, we have to stop the trauma that's gotten people into that space. And that doesn't invalidate anybody's experience of losing someone. That doesn't invalidate. I hope that doesn't. No one feels like that invalidates. I think that I would like to stop homicides by healing people. And seeing what they doing that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's really powerful. And again, I go back to, we're viewing the community as a whole. We're viewing the families in the community. So we want everyone to feel safe. It's not about, letting anybody off, anything like that. It is, we want the community to be safe. And, whether that's somebody re-entering the community or whether that's a family who lost somebody, making sure that they feel heard and they have the opportunity to heal. So, because so often they don't even make it to that, to that option to do ongoing healing and grieving. So thank you for sharing that. Okay. Yes, we can move on. So now we have the equitable and effective homicide response standards. So this was done. MC, maybe you can help fact check me because I don't have the guide in front of me, but this was done from a listening and hearing with Ayana, when 2007?
2010 Boston City Council hearing.
Thank you. At Boston City Council hearing 2010. So this was Boston's largest gathering of survivors for over, I forget the time frame, like 8 hours. It was the BPD just listening to survivors. And from that, they came up with these 7 equitable and effective homicide response standards, and essentially saying from this listening and hearing, if no matter what work you're doing, no matter what space you're working in, and again, that chronological timeline of the kind of the span of where providers come in during homicide bereavement care, if these 7 standards are met, then services will be more equitable and effective. So if services are survivor-centered, if services are culturally competent, if services are practical, consistent, collaborative, communicative, and transparent, then survivors said that they feel like they received more equitable and effective care. We have a handout that gives the definitions of all of these, which we can send after as well. But I wanted to see if any of these jump out to people and if they have anything to say about any of these 7 homicide response standards. Oh, thank you, Amy. Yeah. I think one that stands out to me always is the consistent one. And to kind of stretch, consistent and transparency goes together a lot, which is not so much power is taken away in a situation like this. And so a way of putting power, having survivors regain control is giving them the information, is consistently, checking in when you say you're going to check in, providing them new timelines, even if an answer, you can't get an answer, it's being transparent that like, I haven't heard back from this person, I'm going to try again on this day. Being, consistent in that and transparent of just because they just went through something extremely difficult does not mean that they now deserve to, know less information because you're trying to, not overwhelm people. It's helping them regain control by giving them that information. This example is coming to mind right now is when we are working with a family, helping them plan for a funeral. We do have to get into things around like what is their budget, and we know like victims compensation covers a certain amount, and that's something that we've worked with. Kind of on a side note, there's something called victims compensation, which provides funeral money to a family when they have lost a loved one to a violent crime. And so we know that, that is up to a certain amount for a very modest funeral. If a family is wanting a horse-drawn carriage, we're not going to tell them that they can't dream that. And we're not going to not tell them the truth of how it could be unwise to spend money in that way, because we, want them to get, everything they want on that funeral side. So it is, as providers, having that balance of being upfront and sharing as much information as you can in the same way that you would want to know this, and not withholding things because you don't want to hurt, someone's feelings or make them feel worse. So just wanted to like highlight those two with consistency and transparency and how it can really be a tool to put power back to an individual, to a family that has lost essentially all their power, or it feels like they have. Thank you. All right. So again, we'll share these resources with you as well. And then learning objective 3 is our practical side, which is don't leave families empty-handed. Okay, so don't leave families empty-handed. Survivors of homicide victims need information about their rights. We actually have equipped Boston Police Department and the neighborhood trauma response teams with these survivor right cards. And so our idea is that when you get arrested, you are read your Miranda rights. And so this is if a death notification is delivered on the street or in a hospital, survivors also have their rights. And Boston has a homicide response protocol. And so they have their rights to be involved in Boston's effective and equitable homicide response protocol. They also need a guide to get through the funeral and burial process, and then a victim compensation application, and then to be heard. So sharing some resources that we have, we also do trainings on each of these resources or trainings with a few of them together. And then these are also all things that you can purchase and start using on your own. So we equip every survivor, and of course, this is free of charge for any survivor that we work with. We give them our homicide response toolkit, which we train providers on, and this is provided to every survivor that we work with. And so within our homicide response toolkit, we have our survivor right cards. So that's the thing that you see to the left that says you don't have to go through this alone. Within the next 24 to 72 hours, contact the Lucy Brown Peace Institute for clear steps on what to do next and guidance and support to bury your loved one with dignity and respect, regardless of the circumstances. So that's their, we see about 98% of homicides throughout Massachusetts. And then we connect them to other providers. And we have our Survivors Burial and Resource Guide, which our advocates are trained on, our survivor support coordinators. And we train all other providers who work immediately with survivors on how to use the Survivors Burial and Resource Guide. It's very practical. It has steps on just like places to keep all of the providers. Like we have the asset map that we showed you. It has places in there of how to keep track of all the providers that you're coming in contact with now. It has examples of media statements. Some families receive a ton of media and other families receive none, which also can be extremely difficult. And so another way that we support families in regaining control is saying you can write your own media statement and put it on social media, paste it on your door. You can get some power back in that way. We have an Always in My Heart, which is a workbook for grieving children. And then we have the Survivors Court Preparation and Resource Guide, which is a step-by-step workbook for survivors going through the court process. And so it's very practical. It's things like this is like courtroom terminology. This is where you sit. This is what you should wear in court. All of these things. And then all families deserve to be treated with dignity and compassion, regardless of the circumstances, including those whose loved ones are killed by police. And then before I get to the chat and to answer some questions and to open it up for everyone's questions, we are going to end our time together with this embracing our shared responsibility quote. If somebody would like to come off chat or come off mute and read this.
I can.
Thank you.
Embracing our shared responsibility. Violence is not the problem of one neighborhood or group, and the response and solutions are not the responsibility of one sector of the community or one agency, professional group, or business. Coming together and owning this problem and the solutions are central.
Thank you. Again, just kind of want to like sit with that for a minute. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Elena.
Yeah.
And as we are wrapping up, I'm going to invite you all To try this on, this is something that we do at the Peace Institute. This is called an IAM. And so if you guys have, if some of you are on your laptops, desktops, or if you have paper next to you, like I do, we will invite you to try this on as well. And in the list of resources that will go on to the website, like in connection with this video, we can include the IAM template so that you have it. But the IAM template is very simple. It is a healing modality that we use at the Peace Institute that just invite folks to kind of recenter themselves. We know that a lot of what we've talked about is very, very heavy. It's a lot as well. As Elena said, we've only touched the tip of the iceberg in what a lot of survivors are facing. And we as providers as well, we tend to take on a lot. And this is an invitation for us to be able to recenter ourselves, to hold both aspects of ourselves, and to define ourselves for ourselves as well. I will walk you through what the invitation is. But first, if folks want to just take some time to set themselves up with maybe a piece of paper and a pen, or open up a Google Doc or a Google Word, so that we can go through this as well. And if folks are feeling so inclined, we can share, or we can just keep this, and I can send a copy of the IM to Amy and Kelsey, and of course it'll live on the website. But as we checked in this morning, the invitation was to check in with a principle that is your strength and a principle that is your struggle. And so as we go through the IM, and once again, you have a picture of what the principles of peace are, and they are love, unity, faith, hope, courage, justice, and forgiveness. And the invitation there is in the first space to put the principle that is your strength, and in the second space to put the principle that is your struggle. And this is kind of, it guides you through it. And so in it, you'll see that it's asking you to check in with your senses and to really be present and mindful of what you are experiencing at the moment. So is there anything that you are hearing at this moment, whether that be my voice, whether that be silence? And all responses could be real or imaginary. So if you're following along in the first space, we'll just put the principle that is your strength. And in the second space, you'll put the principle that is your struggle. And the first prompt is, what do you hear? Responses can be real or imaginary. What do you see? That might be something on the screen or something in your environment. Again, responses can be real or imaginary. What do you taste? What do you touch? What do you smell? And what do you wonder about? And you're going to repeat the first line. I am the principle that is my strength and the principle that is my struggle. And what do you seek? And what do you receive in return? What do you experience? What do you plan, or what do you plan for? What do you pray about? Whether you pray, what do you not pray about? What do you practice? And again, you repeat the first line. I am the principle that is my strength, and the principle that is my struggle. What do you pretend? What do you cry about? When do you cry? What makes you cry? And what makes you laugh? What do you believe? What do you try? And what do you dream? And to conclude the poem, you just repeat the first line. I am the principle that is my strength, and the principle that is my struggle. If folks are completing the template, we'll just give you guys a minute. All right, and just an open invitation for those of you that completed that I am. We'll just give some space for you all to share out if you feel called to. And there's no obligation to do so. But as I was introducing the modality, this is just something that allows you to check in with yourself at the moment, and we encourage everyone, whether that be survivors or providers, how you feel now is not how you'll feel perhaps at the end of the day. It's not how you'll feel tomorrow. You won't see the same things, hear the same things, or feel the same things tomorrow. So the invitation is really to continue using this to check in and recenter yourself throughout the work that you're doing. And to keep those as well, just so you're able to consider how you are from time to time. And just we just like to encourage this healing modality to be in the hands of our survivors and our providers and our community partners. So I'll once again leave the floor open for those of you if you feel called to share. If there are no takers, we will, yes, we'll have, we will send all of these along, and they should live next to the video, and I will work with Amy and Kelsey to make sure that these resources are next to the video and that you guys have access to those as well. Thank you. Yes. If there are no takers for sharing the IAMs, we'll move on to questions, reflections, comments. And you can feel free to unmute yourself. I know that there have been some things in the chat as well. If you've put something and you want to bring our attention back up to this, feel free to do so as well. And I know that Elena's been kind of responding in the chat. Any questions?
Thank you so much for doing this. It is really, really heavy and powerful. And it strikes me that like many other traumas, the bad thing that happened is just the first bad thing. Just kind of as you go through this, like losing a family member to murder is horrifying enough, but then to just have that be the start of having to interact with other systems and people and who aren't necessarily meeting you with kindness and compassion. And you know, that film, to hear mothers talk about how they were judged and made to feel blamed and didn't have access to support or resources, it's just inhumane. And I'm just so grateful that the Peace Institute exists and that you are doing this work, because people deserve some kindness, some peace, some healing. And I also really appreciated how you frame all this as a community issue, and it's about community safety. And I think and I think that's part of racism too. It's really easy to break this. Those people have to worry about this, but not me. And that is so much part of the problem too. So I'm just really grateful that you see it that way, that you see it as this is on all of us to create opportunities for peace, to support each other. Thank you for hitting all those, just all the important points, and for doing this work. It's really like, even just sitting in this space for a little bit of time, it's so heavy and painful. I just can't even imagine how hard it is to be with families going through this level of grief and trauma all the time.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you. And I really like that you called out how heavy even talking about it is in a training, because I do want to put in a plug of like I'm so appreciative that you guys wanted us to come and to talk about this, and just remember to take care of yourself. Put on your own oxygen mask first, because we you know, this is heavy, and it's like it's purposeful of getting kind of the point across of it is a bit information overload, which does not, you know, pass us. We're aware of that, and it also is you know, really like healing for you all too. We want, you know, that to be stressed. So please take care of yourselves after this.
So, okay, this is probably my therapist side speaking. Would it be okay for us to, you guys to lead us in like a breathing exercise or a visualization or meditation, like something to kind of reset us? Because, you know, just to reset us, especially if people have had like directly been impacted by a homicide, to talk about this. It's just, you know, I'm just a big believer in like just resetting us, letting us be. If that's okay, if that's okay to suggest.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, you were very low at first. Can you say kind of the first part of what you said before? Did you have an idea for a reset, or you were just asking for one now? I
Yeah,
want to make sure I didn't miss.
yeah, sure. So I'm a therapist, so I think kind of in that vein, and I didn't know if it might be possible for us to do like a meditation or visualization or just a breathing exercise, just to kind of reset all of us. It doesn't mean we don't still have the trauma. It just gives us like sort of a little bit of a recovery from this discussion. I didn't know if that would be possible.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you're kind of like ahead of us, but we also love to use what works for you all. So um, we do the IMs in every training that we do. So those are used exactly for that, not necessarily to use them to divulge more hard feelings or trauma. They're really supposed to uplift. And so maybe if we want to go back to that sheet and just focus on MC, can you go back to the blank? Perfect. So the I am, so those are the two principles that you checked in with. So even if we want to use this as a place that everybody can maybe come off mute, and we could quickly just go one by one saying two of our principles that we can focus on, like two strengths that we have, and we can kind of switch things up. Instead of reading some of our poem, we could just end making sure people leave here acknowledging kind of two principles of peace that they can access to close out our time together, but then to go on through the rest of the day. So I'm going to actually just call people that I see on my screen, but I'm going to start. So I'm going to check out of our time together and close out with I am love and courage. I'll pass it to Bill.
I am love and forgiveness.
Thank you. Amy?
Love and justice.
MC?
Faith and hope.
Kathy?
Oh, love and justice.
Thank you. And then is it Lou? Lou,
Yeah.
I am, yeah.
I am faith and forgiveness.
Thank you. Judy, I am.
I'm courage and hope.
Thank you. Jenny? Oh, Jenny, you're on mute.
I would have to go with faith and hope.
Thank you, Jenny. Wanda?
I will go with unity and justice.
I hear that. Thank you. Kelsey?
I am love and hope.
Thank you. Gabe?
I am faith and courage.
Thank you. Maria?
I will say the same.
Faith and courage. Thank you.
And courage.
Sarai?
Hi, I would say faith and forgiveness.
Thank you. Faith and forgiveness. Deb?
Unity and hope.
Thank you. Lynn, I am.
Love and courage.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Love and forgiveness.
Thank you. LG?
Love and hope.
Thank you. And I'll read Monica's hope and faith. I am hope and faith. And I did I miss? I think I did miss some. I'm sorry. Michelle Ortiz. I am.
I am love and justice.
Thank you. The FHCW psych team.
Like they put theirs in
Hope and forgiveness. Thank you. And then is it Asia?
Aisha?
Aisha.
Yeah. I am faith and forgiveness.
Faith and forgiveness. Thank you. And Barbara, to close us out, I am
Courage and forgiveness.
thanks. Faith and courage. Judy, did anybody not have a chance to close out? All right. Thank you all. And again, like really, we really do embody these at the Peace Institute, and we use them in all of the work that we do. And we use them in times that feel extremely difficult and heavy for ourselves personally and with the clients and survivors that we serve. And so we really believe in those things that you claimed and really want you to spend the courage to stand true in them of I am. And kind of use them as a mantra through the rest of today if you want. I am love and courage, and when I'm feeling like I'm struggling with that, I can say it. I am love and courage.
What if I am fed up? I came in kind of late, and that kid that got killed the other day, the 24-year-old, was my son's friend, and my nephew's been murdered, and Amy knows me well. And a lot of these murders that have happened in the city of Worcester have had a great impact on us in the community. So my question is, and again, I'll shut up after that because I know you guys are trying to get out of here. Where do we go from being exhausted with whatever's? And Amy, if you want to take that up with me, you're welcome to it after this.
No, I appreciate the the sentiment I think is shared by everyone that has been impacted, and I appreciate you calling it out. And also the importance of the both and of, we're not saying the problem does not constantly exist. We're not saying we're not constantly feeling fed up. We also are within ourselves, and we are survivor led. Myself, I am a survivor as well. We are saying that both, multiple truths exist at the same time. And, we've been around for 30 plus years. We know that the problem exists. We are fed up. We are also love, faith, unity, hope, justice, forgiveness.
Absolutely.
For ourselves, not for the problem, not for the providers that we feel like are not working for us, not for systems that are failing us, not for any of that. We are those principles of peace for ourselves so that we can unfortunately stay in the work and keep going. For the Peace Institute, we're around. We have a survivors network. We have we just went to the State House and did the Louis D. Brown MC, what is it called? Day of Civic Engagement. We are constantly working to change laws that would be more survivor centered. There was actually something in victims compensation that said that if a victim is at the helped cause his own demise, essentially, let's say somebody died and drugs were found on them, then the family would receive no money because that homicide would be rendered like a drug deal gone bad or something that necessarily was not true or not. We through the survivors network that the Peace Institute convenes, survivors went over 7 years, fought for that to be taken out of victims compensation. It's now no longer in. So now every single family receives victim compensation. And so we have groups like that you can get involved in. We have ongoing healing groups that we do all the time. We are around, we're not going anywhere. That kind of goes back to the consistency piece. We are also fed up, and we only invite to focus at times on those principles of peace, to say that we also carry those assets within us as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I apologize coming in late. I'm in the hospital, so
I hope everything's okay. No, I'm glad that you're here. And like I said, we're around. We can keep talking. Yeah.
You.
And we are around. So I kind of like, if you have any questions, I know this was recorded, well, you can have the PowerPoint as well and the follow-up information, but we are around to keep this conversation going. Anything else before we get off? No more loophole anymore. In 2017, that got changed.
Thank you. So, and Kathy, thanks for doing that. All of that, just to have families have continued harm past the worst thing that happened to you it should stop there. It shouldn't continue to have bad things happen. And I'm so grateful that people are paying attention to that and doing something about that. And we wouldn't, if you haven't been through it yourself, you wouldn't know that that's what happens, that the quiet room and how people are treated and how they're spoken to. So even if people are not as directly impacted, I'm so grateful that you're getting this information, because like every other trauma, when we rely on the impacted people to do all the advocacy, that's not fair and not right. When you're hurting, you're down, you're not out front. And so we need people to be out front for this. And I really appreciate that people are here and care enough to keep showing up for like Trauma Training Tuesday. It's not a happy, beautiful thing. But it's real and it's life. And to pretend that it's not and ignore the pain and the hardship and the darkness in the world makes people feel even more isolated and alone and hurt. And just people coming together around this, I think is one of the most, like every trauma, the most healing thing you can do is be with other people that care about you and that are there with you. Just being together. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Yeah.
Anyone else want to say anything about?
I just want to thank you guys for posting these. This is my first time actually coming. Amy, you send the stuff to me all the time. But with my schedule,
that's amazing.
Huh?
The hospital's your first break. She's finally sleeping out now that she's in the hospital.
Just saying, because I really wanted to be here today for the whole thing, and I'm so saddened that I missed it. But I just want to let everybody know how much I appreciate their work. I saw in the chat some of the people that worked on the laws and things like. Thank you, sweetheart. I know you're mad at me from earlier, but look, this is the real food, not like what you brought me earlier. Thank you, baby. No, honey, I appreciate you. Oh, I lost my mind for a minute. Sorry, I'm okay now. So with that said, yeah, they've been needing to do this for a long time. I think that one of my reasons that I feel so fed up and frustrated, and you guys have been working on laws, and I don't know where we're at, is that, and I can get caught up eventually, is it's a lie that you get for one bullet every year, a bullet, and you don't even have to have a gun. And that's not true. My nephew shot somebody. My stepson shot somebody. These kids are out here shooting like they're in Hampton Beach at that little shooting gallery thing, like it's a game. And it's ridiculous. And so, is the city of Worcester doing their part? Maybe. Is the police department doing their part? Maybe. Are the courts doing their part? Absolutely not. Because these people are not getting these mandatory sentences. And I think that they look at it as a joke, and that's why these kids are tripping and they're doing and what they're doing. And that boy got killed the other day, and that girl with her daughter, and it's just a bunch of ugliness. because these kids have never learned conflict resolution, which is something that should be taught in preschool, never mind in school itself. But that should be a mandatory class, conflict resolution.
Elena or MC, doesn't the Peace Institute do things with young, it looked like you guys did things with young people that were preventative.
Inspire
as well.
Counseling, how can I help you?
Yeah,
Hi.
MC, do you want to speak on some of the projects that you've been working on with Madison High School and then the Peace Bowls?
Yeah, so initially, like from its inception, the work of the Peace Institute was primarily in the schools. So the first kind of like years, we worked to produce some curriculum that had like it's called peace curriculums. And so we were in the Boston public schools for a while. And now we are kind of returning back into these spaces and really engaging with the younger generation. And so there is my colleague, Ruth, who is our artist in residence. She also holds the youth network at the Peace Institute. And so her and I have been going to Madison Park High, which is in Roxbury, in Boston. And we've been doing things like what we did with you all, which is kind of getting them used to some of the healing modalities, getting them used to incorporating the principles of peace into their day-to-day, incorporating the principles of peace in how they interact with each other. And we are working with some of the social workers in the schools to really make sure that we're offering that kind of support for these students, and so that they themselves become change makers within the younger population. And something else that we've trained them on is our primary healing modality that the video briefly touched about. Is called peace play. And so sometimes, whether that be people that are experiencing trauma, being unable to access like language and that being a function of declarative memory, but sometimes there is no way for you to be able to fully express what it is that you are feeling through words. So what other avenues are we giving, especially our young folks, for them to be able to express themselves without having to resort to like anything violent or any kind of like standoffish thing. And so we have brought the IAMs to them, we've brought the peace play to them, and we've also encouraged them to interact with these and to also champion these among their peers as well. So we are working with some of those students in the Fields Corner Crossroad Youth Council. And what we're doing in Boston right now with the first group is planning a peace day. So those students who are like student leaders and peer leaders, they will present all of this information to the rest of like the school population, and so that they themselves are kind of already starting to build that cycle, because we know that the best youth listen to youth, right? And so the most attractive voice that will get them to kind of engage with these things, something that we found a lot, especially Ruth and I, is that they want peace work, but the how we frame them, they believe that that's an adult thing, right? So like maybe it's too corny the way we talk about it, or maybe we're not dressing it up fancily enough, or we're not dressing it and naming it in a way that they would want to interact with it. And so they feel removed from having to do it because it's or something that, you know, maybe they also don't think that they have the skills for it. And so it's about giving them the skills and giving them the platform and encouraging their leadership as well to be like, you're trained on this. And now not only do you have the skills, but you are also able to influence the immediate youth community around you. So that's some of the work that we've been doing with the youth. Unfortunately though, that is a lot of in-person work, especially with how we've done that. And so Ruth and I are considering, especially with some other asks, how we can like tweak that so that we're able to virtually show up. But that's the work that's been done so far.
That's awesome. Thank you. I know some people from the world of youth work and youth empowerment are here today. So hopefully it makes it to the right people. thanks again. Any
Yeah,
other
thank you for the
thoughts
question.
or comments or questions? Some really great points. All right, then we can stop with 4 minutes left to go, and we will look forward to, we'll post the video recording on the website and we'll share the resources. And again, oh, Kelsey, thank you. If you have a second, if you could please give that feedback form, that would be great. And we will continue to try to get this information into the hands of people that need it. And thank you guys all for being here. And if you have occasion to talk about what kinds of support survivors need, please do. Thanks again, everybody. Take good care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Oh, thank you so much, Elena and MC. You are great.
Thank you.
Thank you.